Alright, today we're going to do something I suppose you might describe as a bit of a meta tutorial. I've been making some tutorials for iPad apps, and notably the music apps, to date, and they've been fairly well received, but they're an absolute pain to make. You know, when I make these tutorials, I like to use the form where I have the iPad screen mirror as the primary display, but then with an inset kind of a webcam view of me talking. And you know, not everybody likes that setup. I personally do like that when I'm watching a tutorial video, and so that's the kind of video I like to make. But it's an absolute pain to make, and if I just give a bit of a flavour why it's such a pain to make before I move on. To do that, typically you need several components in parallel. Now the iPad is a great device, doesn't make it easy to do the sort of tutorials that I'm talking about. Since I think iOS 11 you can natively record the screen capture, including sound, and that includes sound from the built-in microphone if you so desire. Now there's a couple of problems with that right off the bat. First of all, it uses this is my understanding of it, and things may have moved on since iOS 11. First of all, not every app allows its audio to be recorded. Second of all, the recording uses a very compact but very modern protocol called HEVC. It's also, I think, called H.265, and that HEVC stands for highly efficient video coding or codec, and it's great, but it's something that many of the existing editing apps don't understand. And the upshot of that is, if you transfer your film, your recorded screen grab movies into your editor, you lose the sound, or the sound is out of sync. There's a few workarounds. You know, I made a video about this. You can, what I typically, well, here we go, just another step in my workflow for creating one of these tutorials. I would create the screen recording, I would then load it into a free app, well, a formerly free app called Splice, which was from the GoPro people, and then which understands H.265, and then output that as some form of a 1080p video. And that would allow my editor, which is Adobe Premiere Elements version 11, to work with the video with the sound. But I did find that the sound was out of sync as well. So anyway, you want the screen grab, that's the first component. The second component is the sound. Now, getting the sound off an iPad, you know, is never as easy as you think it's going to be. I did do a lot of mucking about recording the sound with AUM. Now that's fraught with problems as well. You're never quite certain that you're recording what you're hearing through the headphones if you're monitoring through headphones. So to cut along another long story short, I abandoned that idea and I began to record basically what comes out of the headphone socket on one of these. That's a handheld Tascam stereo recorder, and that gives great quality recording, but it's a second component that you need to then sync up with the screen recording in the edit. The third thing is I would record the webcam view, which is pretty much exactly what I'm recording on this camera now. That's a third component, and in fact that's even worse than it sounds, because like most digital cameras that can shoot video, there's a 30-minute recording limit on that. So typically I would have 2 or 3 segments of recording before getting down to the edit, and so I would have to do that process of synchronizing 3 times. And in case you're interested, by the way, in why there's a 30-minute limit on video recording, it's completely arbitrary. It's nothing technical. I understand it's actually a way that the manufacturers avoid their cameras being taxed as video recorders. There's a fairly hefty tax on video recorders, certainly in the EU. And so the way they've got around that is to nobble the digital camera. I mean, you can buy a genuine camcorder, but you'd be paying more for it to remove that restriction. So once you've got those 3 different streams, if you like, synchronized up in the editor, even then, you know, the trauma isn't over. It's certainly in my editor, it's very difficult and cumbersome to edit those multiple streams. And so what I've typically done is to render those down into, well, I mean, first you have to tweak it so that the narration view is resized and positioned and so on. But once that layout is, you know, created, I've tended to render that down into a single video file, which can take quite a long time, and then reload that and do my editing on that. So it's just another step, you know, in the workflow that makes it a bit of a pain to do. You know, all of those steps are fraught with their own little idiosyncrasies and foibles. I mean, for example, this is a 2017 iPad Pro, and fortunately this has a headphone jack on, which allows me to output into this digital recorder. The modern iPad Pros, I mean, I'm a bit out of step with the models, but you know, the most recent iPads don't actually have headphone sockets, so you have to use the lightning port with a dongle. So that's what I was faced with making a tutorial, and none of that's got anything to do with basically what I'm trying to do. You know, there's two steps that you're not going to be able to get rid of in this, which is I've got to perform something in terms of generating the raw material for the tutorial. So that's to go through the app on the iPad, talking it through as I'm going, and somehow capture that, I call that performance. And then I've got to take that into my editor and edit that down into something coherent and reasonably timely and interesting. Ideally, that's a bonus if I can do that. Those are the only two things that I absolutely need to do, you know, in this creative endeavour of taking a nap and making a tutorial. Everything else is, you know, dead time, completely wasted overhead time, if you like. So I wanted to cut out as much of that as possible, and you know what I actually want is to have this iPad screen mirror with the inset of the webcam style view. I wanted to be able to see if there's a way to set that up live, so I could just basically switch it on and start talking and playing with the app, and then switch it off, and then I'd have one single video file that I could just take into the editor and start the edit right away. And that would be fantastic in terms of convenience, if I can make it work. So that's what this tutorial today is about. And to cut a long story short, yes, you can make it work, but you're going to have to do a bit of tap dancing to set that up. And if you want to do this for yourself, you're probably going to have to spend a bit of money and certainly a bit of time figuring it out. So let's look at those steps and see. I mean, this may not be the only way to do it, but it's the way that I've discovered using the means at my disposal. So that's what we're going to do. So how do we go about setting up this kind of live, this is kind of like a live streaming setup. Obviously many people do this, you know, you'd have watched live streams. So how do we go about setting this up for iPad tutorials or reviews or whatever we're aiming for? Well, the iPad, you know, it'd be nice to imagine you could do this on the iPad itself. I mean, it's got a front-facing camera, it's got screen capture facilities already. It even has picture-in-picture capabilities to a limited extent. I think I'm a bit out of my depth here, but you know, in the modern versions of iOS, you've got this slide over, and you can have two apps displaying at once. Well, to cut a long story short, I don't think there's a way to do this just using the iPad. My experiments have led me to you know, have to use quite a few more components, and essentially we're recording on a laptop computer. This is my laptop. This is an HP laptop. It's a fairly low spec laptop, in fact, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So what we have to do is we have to get the screen view out of the iPad onto the laptop. That's basic task number one. Now you might think the simplest way to do that is to buy one of these. This is the Lightning to HDMI adapter. Actually, it's not. I don't have one of those. This is the this is the camera connector kit, version 3, or the USB 3 adapter. But it looks identical from this distance. This is the simplest way to do it. You plug this into your Lightning port, and it has an HDMI connector, which you can, well, the simplest thing you can do is plug it into your TV, and then you can have the screen mirrored on the TV. Now, two things to say about this. The first thing, to me, which is a showstopper, as soon as you plug this into the Lightning port, it occupies the lightning port. You can't then use, and particularly if we're talking about audio apps here, you can't use your MIDI keyboards, controllers, I've got a Novation, no it's not a Novation, what is it, a Korg Nano Control, you can't plug a USB microphone in. There is a lightning connector on the HDMI AV adapter, but that's for charging only. That won't allow you to do anything, and that's the same way as the camera connector kit works as well. It has a lightning connector on. So that shuts you down right away. It completely restricts you. I guess for doing a tutorial you could bite the bullet and live with that and only use the on-screen controls. So that would be a viable option. But we need to say something else about this adapter as well. You might just be tempted to see this as a simple wire, and it connects the lightning port to your, let's say, to your TV directly, and so you simply get a latency-free, instantaneous mirror of the screen onto your external display. Now that's not the case at all. The fact is, HDMI is it's a complicated set of hardware and software protocols, if you like, and it's basically a digital serial protocol as I understand it, and the iPads don't understand it. They don't have HDMI encoding in any sense built in. So what they've done is they've built that into the adapter. This adapter, one of the reasons it's not just a cable, there's actually a little computer in here, and what the iPad does, and this is my understanding of what the iPad does, it uses H.264 video encoding. It sends that out to the adapter, and it does that using a protocol which you might know about, AirPlay, which is for screen mirroring over Wi-Fi. The HDMI AV adapter actually expects to receive a video stream encoded in the AirPlay protocol, and it intercepts that, it takes it apart and it re-encodes it in the HDMI protocol and squirts it out the other end. Now that's a quite involved, and this is one of the reasons these things get quite warm, or even hot actually, under load. Now the real issue with that is it introduces a lag, and it's quite a significant lag. So even if you plug this in and connect it directly to your display, you are going to get some latency. And that idea of latency is something that's going to crop up over and over again in this set of experiments. So, to cut a long story short, that's not the solution I'm using, but that would be a viable solution as long as you're prepared to give up needing to plug any other, particularly USB devices, into your iPad to make use of during your tutorial or your review or whatever you're doing. So putting aside the AV lightning connector to give you a hardwired HDMI output, what other options do you have? Well, interestingly enough, I've mentioned AirPlay already. If you have an Apple TV device, which I do, this is one here. This is a device, it's a set-top box if you like. It plugs into your TV via an HDMI connector. The older ones had various other options such as an optical digital connector. There's a network connector, which means it can be hardwired to your home network. I mean, it's an entertainment device, but as a byproduct of having one of these, you can, over Wi-Fi, use AirPlay to mirror your iPad's display or your iPhone's display on your TV. So no hardwired connection is required. Your iPad will squirt over Wi-Fi directly to the Apple TV, and this is connected to your TV via HDMI cable, and you'll get a real-time mirror on screen. Now there is latency. You would expect there to be some latency, some lag in that, and indeed there is some lag. Now there's a very important detail here, the importance of which will become apparent. This is an Apple TV Generation 3, and I actually already had an Apple TV Generation 4 which is connected to my TV, and so I was able to try this out beforehand, but I bought this one second-hand on eBay. In fact, and these are, I mean, to buy this new, in fact you can't buy the Generation 3 new anymore. The Generation 4 is the current generation. There's also a 4K version. The 4K version I think is £180 or £200, depending on whether you buy the 32 or 64 gigabyte version. That allows it to store, streamed data, movies and so on. The Generation 4, I believe that's £130 or £140 new, but you can buy a Generation 3 used on eBay, and you can buy them from about £35 up. I was lucky that I actually got this one brand new, unopened in the box for £42, which is actually less than the cost of the Lightning AV cable, incidentally, which is £49 new. Now, but there is a crucial detail here, which is that if you're going for Generation 3, you must buy there were two versions of the Generation 3 Apple TV. The second one was referred to as Revision A. And if I tell you the model numbers, the model number you must buy if you're buying a Generation 3 is A1469, so look for that code. The original version was model number A1427. Now the reason that's a factor is with Revision A and every subsequent version of the hardware since, the way that the Wi-Fi streaming from your iPad to the Apple TV was done was changed, and in fact prior to that it went through your Wi-Fi network via the router and then to the Apple TV. Now the streaming goes directly from the app. In fact, you don't even need a Wi-Fi network. If I were to set this up, I mean I won't demonstrate this, but I have verified it. If you set this up, turn off your Wi-Fi network, I don't mean turn off Wi-Fi on the iPad, turn off your network infrastructure, your router in your home, the AirPlay streaming still works. And so that cuts out a step, if you like, in the process, and it reduces the latency. And it almost reduces the latency, or in fact it pretty much does reduce the latency to the same as using a hardwired connection over the AV HDMI connector. You might, as I was, be skeptical about that at first, but when you try this out, it's damned fast. It's not quite fast enough really to perform music live, if you like, and monitor it through the... I mean, I should say as well that over HDMI you get the sound and the video as one signal. So you can monitor at the, let's say you stream into a TV, you can monitor on the TV with a pair of headphones, but the latency, it's enough to just take that instantaneous feedback away, and you can kind of, you know, for doing a tutorial using a plug-in MIDI keyboard, I mean, not getting too fancy, it's adequate and it's, you know, absolutely acceptable. Alright, so the next piece of the puzzle is we want to somehow get that into the laptop and then do something in the laptop. In the laptop we're using a thing called OBS Studio. I think that stands for Open Broadcasting Software Studio. OBS is an absolutely fantastic program, very usable right out of the box. You know, it's not very difficult to get to grips with, and it's free. It's absolutely free. You can go, it's open source, so you can go on the web, grab, you know, the latest version of that, download it, and you can be up and running in sort of, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes really. But we have to get our HDMI signal into the laptop, and the way I've done it is I've bought this adapter. This is, again, you can find hundreds of different versions of these things on eBay. This is branded My Pin. This is a hefty metal cost. I did buy this was about £90, I have to say. I did buy something that cost me, I think, 45, which was altogether much more low rent affair, and that kind of worked, but I had problems with the sound. So I invested in this, which is slightly more advanced. So what can this do? Well, it's got an HDMI input, and incidentally it's got an HDMI output as well, so you can use this as a pass-through, and so you can monitor from this live, and you can also monitor sound independently. There's a headphone socket. In fact, it's not a headphone socket, it's a headphone and microphone socket. Now that's a plus and a minus. It allows you to connect a microphone to this, so you could add your commentary in here. I'm going to talk about commentary in a while, but it means that that connector is relatively non-standard. It's the 4-pole, I don't know what you call this, but it's a microphone and headphone socket at the same time, so you'll probably have to buy, you will have to buy a adapter as well. And you plug that in, so we've got a splitter, and that allows you to plug headphones in and monitor, and if you want to plug a microphone into here you can do that as well. But crucially, on the other side we have a USB 3 output. Let me just, if I plug these in, it's going to make things a little bit more clear. So we've got an HDMI coming in from the Apple TV, if you like. So you can see this is already getting pretty involved. So your iPad squirts out over Wi-Fi to your Apple TV into the video grabber by HDMI, and then out via USB 3 to a USB 3 input on your laptop. Now if you take your laptop and install OBS Studio, and with this capture card installed, this doesn't require a driver. These things are natively supported. Video grabbing devices natively supported, certainly by Windows 10, which is on this laptop, also by Windows 7, because I've tried this on Windows 7 on my desktop PC. So if you open up OBS and go through the setup of a video source, you'll find this device listed, and very quickly you'll have a display on the screen. Now the first thing you're going to notice, and in fact it's in, there's a little instruction manual comes with this, there is significant latency in that video capture step. In a way it's analogous to that whole tap dance that the iPad or Apple TV does with converting AirPlay H.264 to HDMI. This adapter has to convert HDMI into some kind of video streaming protocol that Windows understands, and that again it introduces latency. It takes time. In fact it takes quite a long time. It takes 470 milliseconds. I'm not really explaining that very well. What you're going to notice is it's impossible, if you like, to, let's say, play an instrument or do something on the iPad, monitor it on the PC end visually or audio wise, and have any sense of connection. There's such a lag that you have to just give up that idea. I don't think there's any, well, I mean I can't say there's no hardware that you can buy that could do that instantaneously, but as far as I understand it, that's an inevitability. But that's okay, we can live with that. Well, let's just talk about this laptop, because I had worried that the Achilles heel of this setup was going to be the laptop. This is I haven't had this long, I've hardly used this laptop. I bought it just as a general purpose, everyday laptop. It's fairly under spec. This is a HP Pavilion X360, so it's this one of these laptops you can turn it over and use it as a tablet. I won't do that. But it's got integrated graphics, so nothing special. You can't really do super gaming on this. I do run things like Orbiter 2016 on this fairly satisfactorily. But the specs are, it's an Intel Core i5-8250U, if that means anything to you. It's a quad-core processor, and it's got a base frequency of 1.6 gigahertz, and it boosts to, I think, 3.4 gigahertz under load. The graphics suite is Intel UHD 620, again if that means anything to you. So that's the laptop. I did worry that it might be underpowered for this application, but no, I mean my experiments suggest that it's adequate, and it can record the incoming stream at 1080p, and the one thing I forgot to mention was it's a fairly crucial component. There's a webcam on this, so this is going to, first of all, it's going to act as the media hub, if you like. It receives the incoming signal from the Apple TV with the screen mirror and the sound, but it has a webcam which is going to give us that inset head-on view of the narrator, i.e. me. So coming back to what I was saying, this will fairly cheerfully record the incoming stream at 1080p. I have the webcam set at 720p and sized down on the screen, and it will not only faithfully echo that without any glitching to date, touching wood, it will also happily record that onto this uses an SSD, so there shouldn't be too much delay in encoding this to disk. Now of course, if that does turn out to be a problem, OBS has got lots of options for, well, first of all, reducing the frames per second. I'm doing all this at 30 frames per second, so you can reduce the frames per second, you can change the parameters of the encoding. Don't forget, this software is primarily intended for doing live streaming, so there's an awful lot of attention to the detail of minimizing the data rates and so on. So that happily works. Now the question of what to do about the sound is something that is going to come back to haunt us. Now this is something you really need to experiment with to begin to appreciate the finer points of what's going to get in the way. So as I've already suggested, what you absolutely can't do is just plug in your headphones to the headphone socket of the laptop, start talking and playing and expect that everything's going to work fine. And there's two reasons for that. One reason is, depending on where you're going to take your commentary input from, that's a factor. But the other thing is you're going to have that enormous lag in terms of when you press something on the iPad screen or on your MIDI keyboard. There's going to be half a second or more before anything happens, and that's just impossible even if you're just commentating on it. So you have to monitor the sound further upstream, and ideally as far upstream as possible, so that you get minimal lag. And as far upstream as you can go. Unfortunately, you can't monitor from the headphone socket of the iPad, which I don't think you can. I mean, I haven't managed to make that work. If you could do that, that'd be fantastic, because there'd be zero latency. But as far as I can tell, as soon as you do screen mirroring, the headphone socket goes to sleep. I might experiment with that, because you can actually get the microphone, the built-in microphone to work, because I did that accidentally. But on the presumption that you can't monitor from the headphone socket, the next step downstream is the other side of the Apple TV connection, and that is, if you take this screen grabbing box, coming back to that headphone socket, if you plug the splitter in there, you can monitor through the headphone socket there, and you get, as I was saying earlier, you do get a bit of latency, but it's acceptable. If you wanted to play a concerto on your keyboard and monitor it through here, that's going to really mess up your game. But other than that, that's an acceptable way to monitor the sound. Now, the next question is where you're going to take your microphone input from. You've got a couple of options. You could, if you have a microphone that can plug into here, or indeed if you have a headset with a microphone on, you could do away with this adapter and very likely plug it straight into here, and then job done. Well, up to a point. I mean, you've got the sound. We'll come back to the webcam in a moment. The other option, which is the option I've gone for, is, I have a USB microphone, which is the Blue Yeti, and that's a very good microphone, and typically I plug that into the iPad. Now I could do that because I can still use my camera connection kit to plug my USB stuff into the iPad, and then the microphone comes across on the HDMI link as part of the audio signal already mixed in with the audio. And at first sight that seems like the ideal option. Now the problem with that is the commentary needs to match up with the picture on the webcam view, and it won't. It'll be at least half a second, probably more, out of sync, and you can't compensate for that. You can compensate for audio sync in OBS, which indeed you have to do to get the audio and the video to match up on the screen mirror. But what that actually does is it delays the audio until it's in sync with the video. The video encoding takes much more time than the audio encoding. So the only option is to delay the audio until you get the sync matched. Now what we would need to do to get the webcam view to sync up with the streamed audio is the opposite. We need to delay the webcam image by maybe half a second so that the audio catches up with it. I hope you can see that's the opposite way around, and there's no facility to do that. There might be an app that you can install on the PC end that would do that, and that would be great actually. I might go looking for that, because that seems like something that people might want to do. But for now, basically we can't plug the microphone into the iPad end. So what I've done is I've plugged the Blue Yeti USB microphone into another USB port on the laptop, and I mean, just another thing, that's a USB microphone which introduces another latency effect of its own. So, you know, at first go, the lip sync is slightly out if I use that audio alongside the webcam. But as I said earlier, there is in OBS you can compensate for that, and so if you do that you discover that the lag on the microphone is about 200 milliseconds, and once you correct for that you get a great webcam view with great sound. Now of course the webcam, this is a subtlety that you won't notice, or you might notice from time to time, or if someone points it out, which is that even in the best case we're always going to have the webcam view is going to be half a second out of sync with what's happening on the iPad. So if I say I'm pressing the middle C key now and, you know, go ahead and do that, there will actually be a slight discrepancy of half a second there, but that's something that's going to be almost unnoticeable, you know, in the finished product. But that's something we can't get rid of unless we do find some way of delaying that webcam image, so that on the recording those things are perfectly in sync. Now the last issue that's going to leave you with is, how do you monitor the sound? You know, in doing this the old way, I was monitoring the sound through the iPad headphone socket, which means that anything you get on the iPad is exactly what you record, including the narration. Now we've got the narration happening remotely from the iPad sound, and so we've got two audio streams, if you like, that are being mixed together in OBS, and we want to monitor both of those. Now we're monitoring the audio stream from the iPad over this link directly from the video capture card, but we're not monitoring the narration from there because that's coming in upstream on the PC. What we would need to do, I haven't done this, but what you could do is introduce a mixer, a hardware mixer if you like, take the audio output from the iPad into the mixer, take the audio output from, well, there is a hard wire. The best way to do that would be on the Blue Yeti, which you can't see, it's behind me. There is actually a headphone socket for zero latency monitoring, so you could take the output from that into the mixer, and then the output from the mixer is what you'd monitor on the headphones. Now in practice, because I haven't got that hardware set up, and in fact I've decided there's no real need to do that, I can just sit with the headphones on, I can hear the iPad sound, and I can talk, and I'm hearing my own voice in a slightly muffled form, so I'm not getting a true sense of what's being recorded, but it records fine, and it's absolutely usable. So I think that closes the loop. That's pretty much all we need to do, and it sounds very involved, and it kind of is initially. You need the Apple TV, you need the hardware video capture, so it all sounds pretty involved, and I guess it is, certainly in the setup and initial, you know, experimentation with this. And so to summarise, you either need the Apple TV or the AV connector. You definitely need a video capture card, possibly with a splitter cable, and of course you need a laptop, or it doesn't have to be a laptop, could be a desktop computer. But once this is set up and going, and it's pretty much, you switch it on, you start doing your demo, you switch it off, you take the video file, and you begin to edit it. So what I think I'll do now is just set all this up and just give a brief demo of it running live so you can see that it actually does work. And that's my predefined, if I should put the preview full screen, that's what we're going to see. So we've got a live display and Apple TV display there, and I can manipulate that. This is incidentally, this is straight out of the box. This is the original Apple TV software from whenever this was released, 2015. It could probably update if I wanted. These apps may not work, but that should be accessing YouTube. So So that's Apple TV, but we're not interested in that. What we want to do is go into the iPad and we want to go to the control panel, or whatever that's called, control center, screen mirroring, and choose the right Apple TV. And then lo and behold, we've got iPad screen mirrored, and you can see, I think you should see, now we are getting that half-second lag. Now don't forget, most of that lag is due to the process of encoding the video downstream of the Apple TV and getting it into the PC. So most of that, you're not seeing that lag. If you plug this straight into a TV, you know there's a tiny bit of lag, but hardly any. If I take out the monitor, if I were to run up an audio app, Xeon let's say, and we'll choose a nice preset, we should get the sound coming out of the PC, because I haven't got that muted. But don't forget, because you're watching this on the live view, the sound is not synced to what you see on the iPad screen mirror there. So I've got Xeon going. I love Xeon. I love this sort of distorted. Love that. What else have we got? That's enough of that. That should have demonstrated that we've got something that's usable. What else can we do? Anything? Let's put up just another app. Let's go with Tardigrain, since we've had that up recently. Where can we go? I'll do. So there it is, that's all there is to it. If you want to do this, I have yet to make an extensive video test of this setup, but it seems reasonably robust so far, and I was pleasantly surprised that I could actually manage to record the stream directly onto the PC as well without another step. There is another step, which is I have another version of this capture card which I have on my flight sim PC. I have 3 of them in fact. The difference is they are standalone capture devices and they were £55 each, more or less, from eBay again. I think they're the same supplier as this one, and they're all made in China of course. The difference is you just stick a HDMI in, and then the trick is you stick a USB memory stick with a USB socket, and it records directly with a single touch, just whatever basically is sent to the screen in 1080p format. And strikes me that if I wasn't able to, if my laptop wasn't up to the encoding and streaming to disk at the same time, I could have the laptop mirror the screen to the HDMI out and then use that standalone capture card to capture the output. And that would just be one more step, but it's a device I've already got, and you know, pretty much just as convenient as the end product. The end product ends up on a memory stick instead of on the laptop PC. So that's it. I hope this has inspired you to have a go at your own solutions to this, particularly if you want to do video streaming. You know, this would allow you to do video live streaming of your iPad experiments if you wanted to do that as well. So there it is, check it out. If you've got any questions, just ask them below. Or if you've got any comments on what I've done wrong or what I could have done better, I'd be happy to hear those too.